We've always heard that fiber is healthy, fiber is good for your gut, fiber is good for your heart, it's good for your health. But we also hear that fiber is not an essential nutrient. So which one is it? What gives? So today let's explore the fascinating world of fiber. In order to be considered essential, a nutrient has to meet two specifications. One, our body can't make it or can't make enough of it. And two, when you don't get it from the diet, you get this deficiency syndrome, this pretty well-defined set of symptoms. And it's reversed pretty easily when you add the nutrient back to your diet. Lots of examples of that. Vitamin C, if you don't get enough, you get scurvy. Vitamin D, you can get rickets without vitamin D. Vitamin B12, very specific symptoms. Nerve system dysfunction and others. Fiber doesn't fit this definition because there's no specific disease, no specific syndrome if you're fiber deficient, if you're not getting fiber, at least short to medium term. Yeah, you can get constipated, but there's no syndrome that's easily identifiable caused by deficiency of fiber. And it doesn't affect your growth, like for example, vitamin D does. So you can survive without fiber, although more on that in a minute. So although there's some gray area, some ambiguity, it's accurate. It's a defensible statement to say that fiber is not an essential nutrient. Now, that doesn't tell us much about the health impact. Is it positive? Is it negative? Is it neutral? Because there's a number of nutrients that are not technically essential, but are very beneficial. There's creatine, there's nitrates, there's polyphenols. So what's the actual health effect of eating fiber? Well, one very large analysis put together hundreds of studies, and they found that people who consume the most fiber have 15 to 30% lower mortality, that's risk of dying, less heart disease, less stroke, less type 2 diabetes, and less colorectal cancer. Now, we're going to talk about two things. Number one, are these findings believable? Is this really an effect of fiber directly? And number two, what about people who feel worse when they eat fiber, right? How do we understand that? What do we do about that? So we're going to talk about all of it. First, is this a believable result? So this is a compilation of 185 what we call observational studies. You're basically looking at people's normal diets and trying to relate that to their state of health. So the question with these observational studies is always, and we've covered this many times, are they also doing other things that help with their health? Do they smoke less? Do they exercise more, etc.? So there's a few things that we do to test to increase or decrease our confidence. First, any observational study that's worth a cent is going to adjust for obvious confounders. So age, sex, BMI, smoking, exercise, socioeconomic status, other diseases the person has, other aspects of diet quality, etc. And there's a number of these large studies that after adjusting for all that, they still find a number of these benefits for fiber, and that still survives. So our confidence is elevated by that. It's unlikely that these confounders completely explain all the observations with fiber. We also try to test these ideas by looking at randomized trials. And that same large analysis we talked about also looked at randomized trials on fiber. 58 clinical trials were included. So you take a group of people, you split them randomly, and you give half more fiber. Basically what they found was that the group getting fiber showed improved body weight, blood pressure, fasting glucose, so fasting blood sugar, cholesterol, and triglycerides. There's also many randomized trials comparing whole grains to refined grains. And those trials consistently show a benefit of whole grains for lower hemoglobin A1C, for example. And then the third thing we do is we try to understand how fiber might have these effects, what we call the mechanism. So for example, how would fiber reduce body weight? Well, we know how fiber affects satiety. Bulk, number one. Fiber just creates mass in your stomach, increases the dilation of your stomach, makes you more satiated without adding to your calories. Also, some types of fiber form a gel in your stomach that also adds to this physical effect on the walls, and it slows the gastric emptying. That can help satiety as well. And finally, fiber gets converted by the bugs in our gut, our microbiome, into these compounds called short-chain fatty acids, butyrate, propionate, acetate, and those bind to the cells in our colon, and they cause the production of hormones like GLP-1 and peptide YY that promote satiety. We also know fiber slows glucose absorption in the gut, so that may help keep our hemoglobin A1C down. And there's a lot of individual variability with this. Some people with more fiber, their A1C comes down a lot, some not so much. So there are hyper responders and hypo responders for sure. We also know how fiber lowers cholesterol. So fiber binds bile acids in our gut. Bile acids are produced by the liver. They go to the intestine and they help us absorb fats and fat-soluble substances. But fiber can bind those bile acids and cause them to be excreted. Now, we lose those bile acids the liver doesn't get them reabsorbed and reutilized, so it has to make more of them. And bile acids are made from cholesterol. So now the liver is short on those products. It has to get more cholesterol, and one way it gets it is by pulling it from the blood. And as a result, the level of cholesterol comes down. We also know from a number of experiments that these short-chain fatty acids that are produced from fiber in our intestine reduce inflammatory markers and improve the integrity of the gut barrier that keeps things in the gut and doesn't let them penetrate into the bloodstream. One of those short-chain fatty acids, called butyrate, it can feed those cells of the colon. It's one of the main fuel sources for the colon cells. It maintains their health. It helps reduce DNA damage in those cells as well. And if some of those cells in the colon are already malignant, are already cancer-inducing, it can help kill those cells. So it's feeding the healthy cells and it's helping the colon get rid of the unhealthy cells. And so this is one way that fiber and butyrate are thought to help reduce risk of colorectal cancer. So the bottom line here is that the observational studies consistently link fiber to better health outcomes. The randomized trials point in the same direction, and we understand how fiber provides these benefits, the mechanisms. So this big picture means there's a high degree of confidence that fiber and fiber-containing foods causally improve health. Now, let's talk about fiber intolerance. People who can't handle fiber, because if you eat foods that contain fiber and you feel worse, there's no point looking at studies saying that it's supposed to be good for you. Who cares? And this is not uncommon. A lot of people have these issues. I've had more than one in my close family. So one thing you want to do is identify and hopefully fix the underlying condition that's causing the fiber intolerance. Sometimes it's an intolerance to very specific food components. Like celiac disease is an obvious example. The person is intolerant to gluten specifically, so that's wheat, barley, and rye. Those products have to be avoided, but the person can tolerate other cereals and all kinds of other types of fiber. So one tip for people who have trouble with some fiber-containing foods is to try different sources of fiber. Another thing worth giving a shot is a fiber supplement like Psyllium Husk, for example. Psyllium Husk is a purified fiber. It comes in a little powder. You can add it to water. It forms a gel, so it contains a lot of soluble fiber. We're going to talk about that more in a second. You can add it to a smoothie or a yogurt, and you drink it up, and it's an easy way to get some fiber in your diet. Another problem that's very common in people who have these issues digesting foods with fiber is what we call dysbiosis. So it's an imbalance of the gut microbiome. As we said, you need the bugs in your gut to break down the fiber. If they're not there for some reason, that fiber doesn't get broken down effectively and you have digestion issues. So some of the causes of dysbiosis, course of antibiotics, sometimes people take antibiotics and after that they have IBS, irritable bowel, or they become intolerant to some foods. That's because the antibiotic is killing the bacteria that you're trying to fight, but it also indirectly, a side effect, is it kills your microbiome. And then you become kind of overnight incapable of digesting certain foods normally. Food poisonings are another cause. Sometimes after food poisoning, people have these issues. That has to do with the bacteria that come from the outside, mess up the balance in your gut. A low fiber diet chronically, so sometimes people grow up on a standard Western diet, low fiber, and so those bacteria that break down fiber are kind of weak, let's say, in very low number, and so the person struggles breaking down a meal with more fiber. The good news is that in some of those cases, you can reverse it pretty quickly and fairly easily. In my family, we were able to do that in a number of cases just by reintroducing very, very gradually the problem foods. So the person can't tolerate a plate of beans, but you introduce 1 or 2 beans, and then a couple days later, you up the dose a little bit and you ramp it in very slowly. And what you're doing there is you're cultivating those bacterial species that are low, that are weak, that are like going into extinction. You basically grow them up. It's almost like gardening. So you feed them the foods they like little by little, so it doesn't create indigestion, bloating and gas and pain, all these things if it's very small amounts. And you gradually cultivate them back up. And that way, sometimes you can reverse these conditions in a couple of months. If not, there might be a more complex underlying condition that might need medical attention. There's a fascinating aspect of fiber that a lot of people don't realize. We talk about fiber as if it's one thing, one molecule, fiber, but there's many different types of fiber with a lot of different health effects. So they get divided into 2 main categories. So we got our soluble fiber that, as the name indicates, dissolves in water, forms a gel with water, and it has all these health effects, we've touched on, it slows the glucose absorption, it lowers hemoglobin A1C, it lowers cholesterol, it improves satiety, it feeds the gut microbiome, leads to production of short-chain fatty acids. And you can find soluble fiber in foods like oats, for example. If you've heard of beta-glucan, that's a type of soluble fiber found in oats, barley, okra, some fruits like apples, citrus fruits like oranges, legumes like beans and lentils, and psyllium husk, like we said, is another example. And then we got our insoluble fiber that does not dissolve in water, so it forms bulk. It increases the bulk of the stool. And it's basically good for your transit. It prevents constipation, so improves kind of your bowel movements. And you find insoluble fiber in whole grains and a number of vegetables. And then we have another category that is not quite a fiber, which is resistant starch. And resistant starch resists digestion in the small intestine, so that's why it's called resistant. And it gets to the large intestine, to the colon, pretty much unchanged. And there it's broken down and digested by our bugs, by our microbiome. So it's kind of similar to fiber like that. And some of the health effects are similar to fiber as well. It can improve the health of the barrier of the intestine. It can improve insulin sensitivity and glucose metabolism in different ways. And you find resistant starch naturally in legumes like beans and lentils, also green bananas. And the other fascinating thing you may have heard about is you can create resistant starch by cooking a starchy food like a potato or pasta and then cooling it down overnight in the fridge. And then the next day or whenever, you can reheat it. And conveniently, that resistant starch that is created by the cooling, it doesn't get broken down by the reheating, so it's conserved. And so because there's all these different types of fiber and fiber-like compounds, and they have different health effects, the best bet is to have a diverse diet, not just eating 30 apples a day and nothing else. Yeah, you're going to get a substantial amount of fiber, but you want to get diversity as well. So the bottom line is that fiber is not strictly essential. You can survive without it, at least short-term, medium-term, but it's optimal. It's optimal for most people given its beneficial health effects. Okay, how much fiber do we need, or how much fiber should we shoot for? The guidelines in the US recommend 30 grams at least, ballpark. The average American gets half of that, about 15, if that. But this large analysis that we talked about earlier, if you look at the data, it actually suggests benefits of higher ranges than 30. So several of the outcomes that they report, they don't reach a plateau up to 40 or 50 grams. So if we look, for example, at type 2 diabetes and colorectal cancer, their risk just keeps going down as the fiber is going up. And the maximum we see here is about 40 to 45 grams a day fiber consumption. And this is really showing that Westerners don't eat a lot of fiber. So we don't have a lot of information on even higher ranges, but up to this 40, 45 gram a day range, we basically see the risk going down, down, down. So we don't know if it plateaus at some point or if it just keeps going down after that. So based on the evidence we have, trying to get 40 or 50 grams of fiber a day might actually be a little better than getting 30. And so what would that look like? 40, let's say 40, 45 grams of fiber a day in the diet without having to measure it or count it, right? Or obsessing over it, because who's got the time for that? So just intuitively, if you eat, let's say 3 pieces of fruit over the course of the day, common fruits, so 1 apple, 1 orange, 1 banana, that's about 10 grams of fiber. If you get some black beans, for example, 1 cup of cooked black beans is 15 grams. 1 avocado is about 15 grams, depends on the type of avocado, between 10 and 17. So you're basically there. That's 40 grams right there of fiber. And that's only 800 calories, 850 calories. So that's like a third of your food for the day, and you've already met your fiber goals. So it can be quite easy to get enough fiber. I was curious because I had no idea how much I get. So I ran my diet through Chronometer real quick. And I think I got it between 50 and 100 grams, probably closer to 100 because I was already seeing about 50 grams and I was at, I think, 1,100 calories still. And I never think about fiber. I don't think about, I need to get more fiber. I need to get more soluble fiber. I just eat a variety of plant foods that are not processed. So it's really doable to do that, but you can't have a diet that's 60 or 70% ultra processed foods like most Americans. That's where it's going to be pretty hard. And I'm not saying you need to eat 80 or 90 grams. I've seen no compelling evidence of that. You might be perfectly fine getting like 40 grams a day, right? Just getting a diversity of sources of fiber. And like we saw, with a third of your calories, you can meet that and you still got space for a bunch of other stuff. For a lot more on fiber intolerances and IBS and how to beat all that, check out this previous video. and I'll see you in there.